Hello, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Gone Fishing on the Five Reasons Sports Network. You can follow us at Five Reasons Sports on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Wiedeka, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe on the YouTube channel. Helps to grow the reach. A lot of stuff happening in South Florida sports. The Dolphins about to start up, and then the NBA season transaction season never stops there. So you can get a lot of content on the Heat as well as the Miami Hurricanes, Miami Dolphins, Florida Panthers, everything that you can name. We have it there. So be sure to like, comment, and subscribe on that one. And so today we are looking at the Marlins being 10 games over, as is probably the title of this episode here. Marlins, I'm rocking a Florida Marlins jersey today because this is the first time that the Marlins have done this since they were the Florida Marlins, being 41-31 right now. Looking at the standings this week, the Braves actually gained a game and a half on the Marlins. They were 3.5 games up or back last week from the Braves, and now they are 5 games back, despite a week in which they went 4-2. Taking 1 out of 2 against the Mariners and then sweeping the Nationals. Marlins remain 3 games up in the wild card at 41-31. Going to be a lot to talk about in this one, but I want to get into the players of the week really quickly. Your Major League Batter of the Week is going to be Jorge Soler yet again. And it's really that he's doing it with the walks. He's walked 10 times over his last 4 games. And in that time over the last week, he's hit 333 with an on base of 600, slugging 583 for an 1183 OPS. And for your pitcher of the week, I did decide to go with Yuri Perez. 6 innings in the longest start of his career on the road against Seattle in a game when they really needed a victory. Perez really put them in position to help win that game. 6 innings, no earned runs, 6 strikeouts. Just a really good sign from him, obviously, with some of the injuries to the starting rotation. Trevor Rogers being pushed back out. Edward Cabrera going on the 15-day IL with shoulder impingement. It looks like the plans for Yuri have kind of been put on pause right now, and they're kind of just going to let this thing ride with him, especially since he's answered every single question that there has been for him thus far. There hasn't been any box that he has not ticked off as of yet. And I want to get into our minor leaguers of the week, and a guy that's a really hot name right now in Marlins Twitter is Dane Myers. Myers was called up to AAA about a week and a half ago now, and over the course of his first week, he's been a 500 hitter in AAA. Over his last 4 games, he's hitting 500, 546 on base, 850 slugging, 1396 OPS, 2 homers, and 4 runs batted in over his last 5 games. Myers was a converted pitcher. Last year was the first time that he had really started full-time hitting, and you're starting to see the results. A little bit older for a prospect, 27, but he plays all over the field, first base, third base, outfield, whatever you need this guy to do, he can do it. Shows some speed on the bases, 14 steals this year with 11 home runs, so a nice little power speed combination guy. It'll be interesting to see how the organization proceeds with him. He was a Rule 5 pick over the course of the offseason, so you do have the feeling that they are, relatively high on him, that they wanted to pluck him out of the Tigers organization. And for your minor league pitcher of the week, I'm going with Zach McCambley, making his rehab starts at Jupiter. He's made a couple of outings, pitched 3 1/3 innings. He struck out 5, walked 1, allowed no hits. I imagine we will see McCambley back at Pensacola before we know it, and potentially, depending on how things shake out down the stretch, if he were to pitch very well down the stretch, maybe looking at a September call-up for the Marlins' 3rd-round pick in 2020. So I do want to go over what we saw over the course of this week. Obviously, you looked at where the Marlins had been 1-2 in Seattle. You get a really, really ugly game in that first one. The first 2 really kind of looked pretty brutal. um, for the Marlins there. But you're going on the road. You're playing another major league ball club. Seattle isn't. They're not Kansas City. They're not. They're not Oakland. They're a major league ball club. And the Marlins are going to have down games. The important thing right now is, we looked at this entire stretch in totality, and we're at the end of it now. And we said this is where the Marlins need to make their hay. And the bottom line is that they went ahead and did that. Now, there are some complications that have arisen, primarily in the health of your starting pitching. And then Sandy's still an issue. He's just not himself right now. I don't know what it's going to take for him to get back to himself. I don't know, what it is that the organization needs to do. I think all options really should be on the table at this point. Even if that does mean eventually, probably not now because of the injuries in the rotation, but when you do get to a set rotation, if he's still struggling come July, maybe he needs to skip a start or two to just to hit a mental reset button, do something to kind of get him right. Obviously, that's not something that you can do with the state of the rotation right now. Is it looks like they've got Brian Hoeing slotted in to start tonight for the Marlins. But overall, it's one of those things where you're looking at it and it's, boy, Sandy just doesn't look right. But on the flip side of that, you can say, well, the Marlins have made all this hay with the starting rotation, quite frankly, disappointing to this point. I think outside of Yuri and Braxton, you can characterize the rotation as disappointing. Cabrera hasn't lived up to the expectations that we had of him. Luzardo's been pretty up and down. He's been decent, but he's been up and down. I think a lot of people expected him to be better. Sandy, like I said, Sandy's been a huge disappointment thus far in the season, and I don't say that to say that him as a player is disappointing. It's just that his performance this year, I think it was reasonable to expect a little bit of a drawback, but what we're seeing right now is just, I don't think anybody had that on their bingo cards for this year. So right now, you're heading into now a significantly tougher stretch of the schedule here, and you're doing it kind of banged up a little bit inside the rotation. It's like I said, I think that unless you get Yuri or unless you get Sandy and Luzardo to be more consistent, more of what you thought that they were going to be over the course of the year, they will struggle during the stretch. Because they've won games, but I'm not certain how sustainable what they're doing has been. Obviously the bullpen has been nails. It's been lights out. And I can't give them enough credit for that. Whether it's Nardi, Okert, Scott, Puck, the righties, not so much of late. And Brian Hoeing coming out of the pen to start tonight. It's just one of those things where you're looking at this team and you're saying, okay, well, the starters haven't been good, but the bullpen's been keeping them in the games, and then the hitting has been doing just enough to keep them in this. Jazz will be coming back very soon, so I do think that is something positive on the horizon for the lineup going forward. And speaking to the offense in general, I mean, when Soler is carrying the offense like he can, I think that they will be fine just because of the fact that the bullpen will keep them close in a lot of these games. And I applaud Skip for having a shorter leash with the starters than he did in the beginning of the season, because of the fact that he knows that he has a bullpen that he can trust in these situations. But for the time being, it looks like Brian Hoeing is going to slot into that Edward Cabrera role. They did mention that the Edward Cabrera injury probably isn't all that serious. Skip said that he might even throw his bullpens through it and just skip a couple of starts and hopefully come back, right around in that exact 15 days. And then you're looking at the offense here, and it's Jorge Soler, it's Luis Ariz, Brian De La Cruz, and Jesus Sanchez, both kind of scuffling a little bit of late. Jacob Amaya did come up. He actually impressed, I think, in his first start in Washington. Hopefully, there is more playing time on the horizon for him, especially with Gene Segura going down. Skip says that he expects to have him back in 10 days or so, but I'm not so certain on that. I think that there has to be some things that the organization sees from Gene um, before they're ready to get him back out onto the field in kind of a timely fashion. I'm not now. That's not to say that I think that this injury is being made up. I do believe that he's genuinely hurt. I just think that it's an opportunistic moment for the organization to kind of see what other options there are in the midst of a guy struggling. And then, in his rehab starts, perhaps he catches something, comes up, gets hot. And that's kind of what you're hoping for. But for the time being, and when you look in the lineup and the flexibility now that you've kind of been given through this, it can kind of be a little bit of a blessing in disguise where now you're looking at possibly platooning Birdie and Wendell at third for the time being. And Birdie's been hitting pretty well lately. Wendell, since he's come off the injured list, has been hitting much better than he was at the beginning of the season. You have Jacob Amaya playing short, who, as I mentioned, he looked pretty good against Washington. We'll see how many more at bats he gets going forward. But the more that you can get these guys reps, and the more you can lengthen the lineup out. Nick Fortes, for example, has been hitting a little bit better. So even though the guys in quote unquote the middle of the order have been struggling, aside from maybe Jorge Soler, you're getting more production from guys like John Birdie, from Joey Wendell, from Nick Fortes, and when you're getting those guys kind of feeding into the 1-2 that is Arise and Soler at the top of the order, you can create some runs, especially late in ball games, that way, and kind of manufacture runs. So say that I think that the offense has been bad, um, but I do think that relying on the offense to be opportunistic at the right times and to consistently have to come from behind isn't isn't the formula for this team. It's just not. Um, they need to get better starts from their starters, particularly Sandy and Luzardo at the moment. Cabrera too when he comes back. Um, so that and the offense needs to get going earlier in these games, because it's not a switch that you can just flip that, okay, well, hey, we're in the sixth, seventh, eighth inning now. We're gonna really get this going. We're gonna just keep duplicating these late last minute rallies. Um, there has to be something. There has to be something there that's hey, we gotta get out to a lead every once in a while, and have a laugher every once in a while. The pressure that the bullpen faces with this team is immense, because they're constantly trying, okay, well, we got to keep this a one-run game so our bats can come alive and come back. And I know that I sound like I'm talking about a team that's 20 games under rather than 10 games over. Um, but the truth is 10 games over in June doesn't mean anything. I mean, it's great, it's exciting. The baseball is fun. I'm having a ton of fun watching this team play right now. Um, but at the same time, I can look at things and I can say, well, if they want this to continue through the tougher stretch of games, then they need to do X, Y, and Z. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, and kind of detailing this here, because they've got 3 games upcoming versus Toronto, 4 games coming up versus Pittsburgh over the course of this week. Little nifty 7-game homestand. They're going to get Jose Barrios tonight, and then they're getting Yusei Kikuchi tomorrow. So they're getting quality starters from Toronto, and it'll be interesting to see, how they stack up against, the Torontos of the world, the Pittsburghs of the world. They have a series with Atlanta right after the Pittsburgh series. That's where the Marlins are going to show us who they are. Um, and I think ultimately, I think they'll probably play about 500 baseball over that stretch, because I do think that this is real, and I do think that having a bullpen as strong as the Marlins is, can take a team a long way. And I think it has taken the Marlins a long way. I think it'll continue to take the Marlins a long way, because of the fact that I believe, and principally, this is what I hold to with Jazz coming back. I think you will get, eventually things will turn for Jesus Luzardo. They'll turn for Sandy. They'll turn for Cabrera when he comes back. I truly and honestly believe that. And then I believe that the bullpen has shown you who they are. I don't think that they're playing over their heads. I think that this is who the bullpen is. You know, you look at these guys and it makes sense how good they are. You know, you're not looking at this and going, this isn't Devin Smeltzer throwing 6 scoreless innings. And I hate to just throw a stray at Devin Smeltzer like that, but it's really, you know, this is repeatable for them. This is who they are. So it's going to be a lot of fun to keep up with that. For Prize Picks props of the day, I would lean towards, honestly, in this one, unfortunately, I'm leaning towards taking, Toronto's batters against Brian Hoeing. Who knows how stretched out Hoeing even is in this start? I wouldn't imagine you see him go than maybe more than 3 or 4 innings, if you're fortunate. But I hope he's, efficient tonight. Maybe gets through 4 innings in 50 pitches or so, because that's really what they're going to need. Because this is going to be almost like a de facto bullpen game for them, as he continues to stretch out and kind of get back into that rhythm of being a starter. So I would look for Toronto total base props for the hitters over there. But yeah, as I mentioned, it's a lot of excitement. I know that it sounded a lot more negative than I think I even intended to be going forward here, but it's really just, this is what high stakes baseball looks like. This is 10 games over, middle of the season. You need to keep your spot, and you need to do it against some of the better teams in the league. And that's where the Marlins are right now. They passed the last test, which was beating the teams that you're supposed to beat and stacking up the wins there. And now the next portion is, okay, well, now we need you to hold your ground against some of the better teams in the league. And I think it's going to be a ton of fun. I think the fans ought to come out, support the team. The ball club does have a completely different vibe. I think Skip has done a great job for this ball club, at least just from the perspective of the team mentality and the clubhouse. I think the energy there is so much better than it has been in years past, and I think that that's something that's going to really reverberate with the fan base. But at the moment, 10 games over 500. They've got 3 versus Toronto, 4 versus Pittsburgh upcoming here on the road, or on the homestand. We will be back next week detailing, hopefully, what was a successful homestand for the Marlins. If any news comes out, any new injuries, hopefully not transaction news as the deadline draws closer. We do know that this team is looking to be a buyer at this point. At 10 games over, I don't see how you wouldn't want to be a buyer for this team, because they're not particularly far away. I think that this team is maybe a bat or 2 away, maybe 1 starting pitcher away from really being okay. Well, now we're, at the moment, I think that their record is a pretty good indication of who they are. I think that they're probably a wild card team, but I think that they're very close to making that jump from a wild card team to, hey, you know what? Let's roll the ball out there, see what happens. Maybe we can make some noise in the playoffs. And I think that that's what they ought to be looking for, because I don't think that they're very far from it. And it's going to be fun down the stretch here. Dead set in the playoff race. Look forward to seeing the fans out there. Look forward to seeing more social media engagement. The Marlins fan base is starting to come alive in this, as ridiculous as I know that sounds to people that aren't in this market. but there really is a buzz and an energy that's starting to form around the Marlins. And, you just wonder if the Heat and the Panthers handed that baton off to the Marlins here that started with FAU and UM and these teams getting far in their respective leagues. So it'll be fun to see if the Marlins can continue the same, as I mentioned, 3 games versus Toronto, 4 games versus Pittsburgh. And we will be here covering all of it with you on Gone Fishing. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye bye.